Hi, my name is Tina, and in this video I am going to talk about the parts of the neuron and how neurons communicate with each other. This is my model of the neuron. I made it out of styrofoam, paper clips, tape, post-it notes, and hot glue. I hope you enjoy the video. The first part of the neuron is the cell body, which is the central area of the neuron that contains all the organelles that are vital to the survival and function of the cell, including the nucleus, which contains the DNA of the cell. The dendrites are the branching fibers of the neuron that receive information from sensory receptors or other neurons and conduct impulses towards the cell body. The axon is a single long fiber that extends out of the cell body and passes information to other neurons or to muscles or glands. The axon is encased by segments of layered fatty tissue called the myelin sheath, which protects the axon and speeds up neural impulses. The gaps between the segments of myelin sheath are called the nodes of Ranvier. The terminal of the axon is split into branches, and the end of each branch, called the terminal button, contains neurotransmitters. The synapse is the space between the axon terminal of one neuron and the dendrites of an adjacent neuron. Neurons never touch each other. The neuron has a semi-permeable plasma membrane that only allows certain molecules to pass through. It does not allow ions to pass through. When a neuron is at rest, it is negatively charged due to an unequal distribution of ions across the plasma membrane, with more sodium ions outside and more potassium ions inside, and this is called its resting potential. When the neuron receives excitatory signals from either a sensory receptor or another neuron, it is depolarized or made less negative. If these signals exceed a certain level, called the threshold, an action potential, or an electric impulse, is triggered. If the threshold is not reached, no action potential will fire. A neuron either fires a complete action potential or does not fire at all, and each action potential it fires has the same intensity. This is known as the all-or-none principle. The depolarized voltage in the neuron causes ion channels to open and sodium ions to rush into the neuron. Since sodium has a positive charge, the neuron is depolarized further, which causes potassium channels to open and potassium to rush out of the cell, repolarizing the neuron. The positive sodium ions diffuse down the axon, depolarizing the next section of the axon, opening the ion channels and allowing more sodium to rush into the neuron, which in turn depolarizes the next section of the axon. The myelin sheath speeds up the diffusion of sodium by only allowing ion channels at each node of Ranvier. As each section of the axon is depolarizing, the preceding section is being repolarized by the potassium rushing out of the cell. As the action potential reaches the terminal buttons, it causes the release of neurotransmitters from vesicles into the synapse. These neurotransmitters travel across the synapse and bind to receptors on the dendrites of the postsynaptic neuron, sending either excitatory or inhibitory signals. The excessive neurotransmitters left in the synapse are reabsorbed by the presynaptic neuron in a process called reuptake. After a neuron fires an action potential, it goes through a period of inaction called the refractory period, during which it cannot be stimulated and fire another action potential. After the refractory period, the neuron is ready to repeat the whole process again.